Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is one of my best friends, Maxine Taylor, and we've had her here on the Natural Healing Show before. You've loved what she's had to say. Maxine Taylor is America's first licensed astrologer, and she's an Amazon #1 best-selling author. We are here to talk with her about her 8th astrology book, Hidden Messages in Your Birth Chart. And you can find out more about Maxine Taylor and her wonderful work at her website, MaxineTaylor.com. Welcome, Maxine Taylor.
Thank you, Catherine. It is just great to be on the air with you again. We don't get together often enough.
Yes, not like pre-COVID.
Yeah.
There you go. Now, Maxine Taylor, you've just published your 8th astrology book, Hidden Message in Your Birth Chart. Why did you choose this for a title, and what prompted you to write this book?
Oh, well, this is my current pièce de résistance. Hidden messages in your birth chart. And by the way, this is the very first zodiac, Catherine, I ever used. And I resurrected it because I just love it. The reason I call this book Hidden Messages in Your Birth Chart is because the horoscope, the birth chart, is actually filled with all kinds of messages that you and I and everybody in your audience received when we were just little kids, very often before we were born, when mommy was carrying us. And these messages run our lives. Psychologists can tell you this. It's a known fact. When I found out, because I've always wanted to understand me and my family, you know, families are strange, and you want to understand, why was I born into this group and how do I function at my best? So I've always been interested in not necessarily what people say, but what they do. Not necessarily what they do, but why they do it. And it's in the birth chart. So when I discovered, I mean, I've been an astrologer for over 50 years. When I realized back approximately, oh, I don't know, 45 years ago, that I could read everybody's programming in their birth chart, I was thrilled. And that's how I do my readings. As you know, Catherine, I talk about what makes you fabulous, what makes you awesome. However, most people do not live up to their potential. And that's because they are following programs that are running that they don't even know are running. And so what I've been helping my clients do is understand, see their programming. Now you might say, well, okay, so they see it, then what? Well, that's a whole separate category of books that I've written to help everybody release the programming and rewrite it their way. So it's my passion.
Now,
That's a simple answer.
Yes, Maxine, only 50 years as an astrologer. You beginner, you.
Yeah. Pushing 51.
Yeah, pushing 51. Yeah, and you know, it takes 10 years or 10,000 hours of practice to be a master at anything. So, you know, I've done natural healing for 28 years. We've been friends for a long time as well, right? So it's that longevity that helps you to really pinpoint patterns really, really quickly. So, hidden messages in your birth chart, your 8th astrology book. What is this book about? that we haven't already read in your previous astrology books?
What I've done in my previous books, I've talked about how to interpret the chart. In this book, I focus on the messages, both verbal and nonverbal, that we received. And remember, it's those nonverbal ones that are the most powerful because they're hidden, they're secrets. And what I've seen is that every family has secrets, every person has secrets. And primarily, they deal with protecting the family, making the family look good. Personally, we have each of us our own secrets about how to be loved and wanted and accepted by our family because they're the first people we know. And so, if you know what they are, they over time quit running you. They lose their power. I have seen so many people fall right back into their story. I myself have gone back into my story so that I really can't judge anybody for going back into their story. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt and the ball cap. Yes, I've done it. And once you see it, you can stop doing it over time because the only thing we're doing is looking for love, looking for acceptance, exactly as we are. And so we jump through these hoops. Some of us become givers, others become takers, because that's the only way we can get anything. The giver, if I keep giving, someday they will love me. No, that ain't gonna happen. And that's where it's very difficult because that's reality. So I wrote this book from the standpoint of what you may not know about your messages that's running you. And the foundation of this is there is nothing wrong with you. You are perfect exactly as you are. You are source energy in physical form, and that makes you good enough, just like you are. The problem is that when we were little, we received a bad message, usually from mommy. And that is what starts the whole chain of events of us playing roles. You get rid of those roles and you're free. The problem is the fear of being thrown out of the family, not being loved, not being accepted. For those of us who are very creative, and I include you, Catherine, because the technique that you use for analyzing people spiritually, you are a one of a kind, absolutely a one of a kind. That is your specialty. You're fantastic at it. You know how I feel about that gift that you have. Well, um, very often we're not allowed to express our gifts because an older sister or a younger brother requires the attention and is the chosen one. And so we're stuck in what the birth chart says. You can change it if you know what it is. And you know how I've always encouraged you, because you're so outstanding with what you do, to pursue that. Uh, I don't mean to the exclusion of all the other marvelous things you do, like write books and help people all the time and teach classes. But that is where you are, the shining star that you came here to be.
Oh, thank you so much. And I think Maxine is referring to what I talked about in my 10th book, Reading the Soul, which is about when I do a medical intuitive reading, what I look for at the soul level, which is very much in alignment with what you talk about in hidden messages in your birth chart. And I feel like you do that pretty much everybody needs a healing on overcoming that feeling like you're not good enough. And to me, you're here to be you. And once you understand that the world needs your unique energy, It's like you're already a VIP. You're a vibrational interference pattern. Your energy is unique to you. And once you understand that the world needs you, you don't have to be taller, shorter, thinner, fatter, drive a different car. You just have to be you and give yourself permission to express yourself. As Maxine talks about in her book, Hidden Messages in Your Birth Chart. So, Maxine Taylor, who is your ideal reader for hidden messages in your birth chart?
The ideal reader is the person reading the book. I've asked a friend of mine who's very knowledgeable who the ideal reader is. Who should I write my book for? And I was told, write it for you.
Hmm.
Write it the way you want to learn things. And what I do is, short and sweet and to the point, very not structured, but you can follow along very simply. So my ideal person, to expand that, is the person who is ready to change their life. The person who is ready to truly see how fabulous they are and get rid of the lie that unless they play a certain role, a giver, whatever stuff we've bought. When you're ready to give up what isn't working in your life, because the way people are is the way they're going to be. And if by the age 50, your mommy still doesn't like you, or your sister still hates you, you can pretty much bet it's going to stay that way. But you can change you. And the way you change you is to say, okay, I'm going to be my very, very best. I remember when recently I asked a friend of mine, are you ready to be a multimillionaire? And she said, oh, yes. And I asked another friend of mine, and she said, I already am. And I thought, okay, these women are set, have a leg up. But you have to be ready to be glorious. You have to be ready to give up the lie that somehow, someday, your mommy or your daddy or your uncle, whoever, is going to notice you and tell you how great you are. No, they may not even be living, but the story that they put in your head is going round and round. And like a Stepford wife or husband or child, you're living it over and over again. And there comes a point, Catherine, I know that you know what I'm fixing to say here. There comes a point in your life when you say, you know what? This is not working. Now, what do? I see I've been jumping through hoops, keeping quiet so that I can let my mother or my father or my brother or my sister be in the limelight. I'm a natural leader. It's time for me to lead. And when that happens, look out, because the Red Sea parts, the heavens herald you, and then every block that you ever had comes up to be dealt with. But when there's no stopping you, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, Catherine, when you know that there's nothing that's going to stop you, you're not going to let them do it, miracles
Now, Maxine Taylor, you, of course, are 50-year plus astrologer. And your book, Hidden Messages in Your Birth Chart, is based on astrology. Can you give some examples for our audience of some of the messages that you find when you do read a person's birth chart?
Oh, yes, I'd be glad to. Let's start with mommy, because she is the first person we actually come in contact with in the womb. Wherever the moon is, that's your mother's message about where to look for your emotional security. You notice I didn't say that's where she told you you would find it. No, that's where she tells you to look for it. Because remember, when you are following an earthly diagram, it's limited in scope. And so there's always a catch-22 on mommy's messages. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say, for example, you have, or somebody, perhaps one of your viewers, one of your listeners, has the moon, which is mother's message, in the 7th house of marriage. Okay, mommy's message, whether verbal or nonverbal, is to look for a spouse for your emotional security. We're not even going to go into the failed marriages people have, even with the moon in the 7th house. The moon is also change. The moon is what you're emotionally drawn to instinctively. But the catch-22 message is that there is an emotional tie between you and your mother that is tantamount to a marriage. In other words, you're emotionally drawn to people who represent your mother, but mommy's message is, oh yeah, get married, get married, get married. That will provide you with security, whether you're gay or straight. Just have a partner, a life partner. But the catch-22 is she wants to be your partner. She may not know it, but she owns you. That is a perfect example of it. A lot of times in somebody's chart, they'll have the moon in the 1st house, and mommy's message is to look to yourself for your emotional security, which means you're alone. And the catch-22 is she really didn't want you to be yourself. The self she wants you to be is just like her. And so these are the things that I share. These are hidden messages. They're secrets. Now, you can't take her to court on it. But when you know it, it can be very upsetting at first. But it's liberating to know it. In other words, you sensed it, you've known it, and now you're validated. You're not crazy. So what you've been feeling is true.
So what you're saying is where the moon is in your birth chart tells you your mother's hidden messages. And what about the sun? What does the sun tell us?
Oh, the sun is daddy. Now the sun is our ego. Excuse me. We're in Atlanta and we're pollinated. The sun is the center of your life. And so if your father loves you, you love you. If your father doesn't love you, you don't love you. And it's so simple. And you're going to keep looking to your father for love. Well, it's like asking this bottle to love you. It can't. It's not possible. But you keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And so the center of your life is the male message. Now, let's say, for example, you have the sun in the 11th house of friends. That's a terrific placement for it because the center of your life is being with friends. It's being a humanitarian. It's gorgeous. Catch-22 is while you are to be a leader, the sun, your king with your friends, daddy wants to be your friend. And that's confusing because is he daddy or is he friend? Well, it's going to flip and that'll drive you crazy, which means you will be unknowingly looking for daddy in your friends. You'll be looking for somebody to take the lead at the same time that you want to express your leadership. That gets very messed up, doesn't it? So this is why we as earthlings, we as humans have these messages that are contradictory. And so the only thing I have to say to any of my clients is, you're not crazy. You're not imagining it. And because many of my clients, as I'm sure yours, confide in me and say, well, I feel this way. Why do I feel this way? when I should be feeling that way. No, you shouldn't be feeling any way but the way you feel. Does that explain it?
Maxine Taylor, author of Hidden Messages in Your Birth Chart. Why is knowing our parental programming so important?
Well, it sets you free, or it's the first step to setting you free. As you know firsthand, because you were such a vital part of it. My method, Take Back Your Life message, Take Back Your Life method, um, which I got because of you and your presence, says that until you know who's running you, you're not going to be happy. And even success, even millions of dollars will not bring you happiness because you're doing it to please somebody else. Being number one in your field is never enough because you really want to be married and have kids, let's say, or you really want to feel at peace and in love. But you can't because there are hidden messages that own you. And I haven't taken a survey, but looking around just at the world, I have to say that probably 99% of the people are just robotic. They're living these messages. They're playing these roles. You'll see it in politics. You'll see it in actors and actresses. People are programmed. They do not own their own lives. So this, both astrology, the way I practice it, and my Take Back Your Life method are for the person who really wants to understand themselves and live their highest and best life. And most people, Catherine, I know I've told you this when we've done lunch or dinner on different occasions. My observation is most people don't want to solve their problems. They just want to live comfortably within them, which means they're waiting for the other person to give them what they want. It ain't gonna happen. And that's why they're so upset and so aggravated. And that's why movies that portray that story touch them so deeply. Those movies kick them in the rear because they're living those movies and they don't know how to get out of them because they're not willing to look at what's going on. They think it's their fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You're just following a program. Well, turn the page and change the program.
Now, Maxine Taylor, in your professional opinion, why is it so important that we release this parental programming once we recognize it?
Because recognizing it is not enough. It still owns us. Oh, and if you rebel against it, speaking as a rebel, I left my badge in the other room. You can rebel against it. You can say, I see what you're doing. I know what you're doing. I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to do it. Rebellion makes it stronger. It doesn't disappear it. It doesn't replace it. It's real important to look within and say, okay, if this is my story and I can change it, what do I want it to be? How do I want it to be? And that's where Take Back Your Life, and I give you full credit for that title. That's where it comes in.
And for our audience, will you share Take Back Your Life is one of your many books, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and just for a moment, will you share with our audience about your book, Take Back Your Life, and what that's about?
Well, excuse me, the pollen has gotten me. I changed the title of my forthcoming book. Take Back Your Life didn't even begin to cover it. In today's age, women have taken a step forward and are insisting on equality in the workplace and in life. And what I've been noticing over the years is that so many women have been abused sexually, whether through a joke, whether through just a remark, or an attack, a molestation, or a rape. And so that becomes their first sexual imprinting. It owns them, and they don't know how to get out of it. My book, I changed Take Back Your Life because that's the name of the technique I use. I changed it to, I got to think for a minute because it just got back from the editor. It's your first sexual imprinting and a method for releasing old trauma.
And this is an upcoming book, which I'm sure we'll be talking to you about in an upcoming interview. Now, going back, Maxine Taylor, to our parental programming, isn't some of this programming that we receive positive?
It certainly can be. It certainly can be. However, Catherine, you and I, because of the clientele we attract, people who have loving, wonderful, positive programming don't seek us out usually. Now, they will seek us out. I can only speak for myself in this case. Women of a certain age, because I'm a woman of a certain age, in French, une dame d'un certain âge, an older woman.
We both are, Maxine. 6'2", I own it. And my hair is real. I've got the gray in it to prove it.
What I've seen is, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. Tell me where I left off, honey.
We're talking about positive programming.
Positive, yes. Okay, your first sexual imprinting can be that sweet goodnight kiss at the front door after the prom. I mean, that's my generation. And that person won't come to me. The one who will come to me is the one who's been molested or is having trouble sexually or whatever. However, because this runs every area of our life, it's vitally important that we look at it, face it, and release it. So the type of client I get is when they are a woman of a certain age, they say, look, my kids are grown, I'm single, my mortgage is paid, but I feel like there's more in life for me than just sitting around playing bridge with the other ladies. And so I attract to me a woman, usually a woman, who wants to know what her potential is. She's been a mom. She's been the PTA president. She's done all of that. She's a grandma even. And she says, that's not enough for me. I want to do something important with my life while I'm here. And do you think it's too late for me to find love? Well, no, it's never too late. That's number one. Number two, I can look at the birth chart, tell her all of her potential, or I can look at her or I can look at her forecast and tell her when that potential is going to arrive. Because if she's sought me out and verbalized, put out to the multiverse what she wants, she's getting ready to receive it. And so I'm always thrilled to look at her chart and tell her, even if she's ordered just an annual forecast, if I see that in 2 years, her whole life is going to turn around, it's going to be awesome. You better believe that I'm going to give her a sneak preview. So
now, Maxine Taylor, how do we recognize the programming that we receive from our parents?
It doesn't work anymore. That's how you see it. You're tired of being treated poorly. You're tired of having to give everybody in your family your attention and get none back. A lot of women have that issue, and it's so sad to me. Um, I'll tell you what opened my eyes years ago. Catherine, do you remember the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray?
Love that movie. And
I love,
you can watch again and again and laugh again and again. Yes.
yes, and it's true. What he's saying, what he does is true. Now, he's dealing with instant karma, so we're not going to, go there, but that can happen also. When the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result. If you're expecting, like I said, love from this bottle, you're insane. If you're expecting love from your older sister, who's always been the star, guess who's going to always be the star? This is a true story, true story. And I may have shared it with you at some point in time, many years ago, after I had legalized astrology and become known and written a couple of books. And, I went to visit my mother. She's no longer living, but she lived in another state. And I brought a blank photo album and all the newspaper articles about me and pictures and all that. And I said, Mom, I think you might enjoy putting this together. About 6 months later, I went back and visited her. She hadn't touched it at all. So I did it. These are my accomplishments, blah, 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 blah. I just wanted her to say, I love you and I'm proud of you. Well, that was never forthcoming. She was waiting for me to mother her. She then came to visit me at one point here in Atlanta, where you and I both live. And I had just been interviewed on one of the top radio shows in Atlanta that went all over the country. And my mother was sitting in the car with me as we drove from the airport. And she was talking about herself, talking. And I said, Mom, that's me on the radio. And she said, oh, okay. And she just kept talking. That's how you know you're beating a dead horse. You're not going to resurrect it. That is very painful to acknowledge because you're trying so hard. You're at the very same age emotionally that you were when you got your bad message. Well, that little child keeps buying that she's bad, so she just plays the role of if you don't get the nurturing, you give the nurturing. Catherine, I know you know that one. So that's how you know it's not working, and it makes you feel terrible.
Now, Maxine Taylor, in your professional opinion, who are the main authority figures that program us?
Well, our mother and father or surrogates of mother and father. Nowadays, people are get married and divorced, or a spouse dies. And so there's a string of spouses. Mother, father, the older authority figures in our lives, like grandparents, and these are the carriers of the culture. They are our bloodline, our ancestors. And these are the ones that say, because it's represented by Saturn, you should do this, you ought to do this, you have to do this, you're obligated to do this. Oh, well, why don't you just slit your wrists now? Because you don't have a choice. And I've noticed in people's charts, Saturn in most astrology charts rules fear and restriction. Again, well, let me just jump off the nearest bridge if that's what it is. There has to be a positive twist to it. And there is, I found it. The way I read Saturn in somebody's chart, and I don't know anybody else who does it this way, is it's the planet of responsibility. I don't mean obligation, but the definition I use of responsibility is respond to your talents and abilities as a leader in whatever house, whatever area of the birth chart Saturn falls in. So it might very well be that to please the authority figures in your life, and you're not about pleasing anybody because they're all gone anyhow past a certain age. Who are you pleasing? What you're going to do is respond to your ability as a leader. You're going to take charge. So let's say you have Saturn in the 10th house of your career. You are going to be a world renowned leader. And when I say world, I mean in your world. It can be as large or as small as you want. Now, the catch-22, there's always going to be an authority figure, a leader who's already there and represents your ancestry and says, I want you to be a leader. The catch-22, I'm the leader, you do it my way. So it's a double message, opposite message. And the beauty of astrology is that you have the choice as to how you want to use it. Most people don't want choice. They want the other person to change. Well, that other person left the planet 20 years ago. They're not changing. It's up to you. And that's when people turn to drink because they have to escape. Saturn is the planet of reality. And so very often what I've seen, and this digresses just a teeny bit from Sun, Moon, Saturn, Pluto, because we haven't talked about Pluto yet, but people tend, I have found, to live in a fantasy, in a mirage, wishful thinking. Oh, someday he'll divorce his wife and marry me. No, he won't. No, he won't. Get with it. And what happens is someday I'll get money. Well, what are you doing? You sweeping floors. You need a better job. What happens is that at some point, Saturn, reality, bursts the bubble. And the person can't face it. They run back to fantasy. They drink, they take drugs, they're in make-believe. They watch the movies. They need 8 hours of sleep, 10 hours of sleep. They can't face reality, so they flip between the two. The third way that nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, only some people know is truth, which is Jupiter, God's law, and the sun, the giver of life. And when you deal with truth, the truth does set you free because you're no longer a prisoner of, oh, someday my prince will come. Yeah, it's your dog. You're going to call it Prince. That's how it's going to show up. And it's not restriction. It is truth and personal empowerment. So that's Saturn. I am assuming you would also like me to talk about Pluto.
Please. What authority figures that Pluto represents in our lives?
The matriarch, the the tail that wags the dog. I was going to say that sometimes two people are the tail that wags the dog, and so I make one word out of their names. The tail that wags the dog. Pluto is the planet of total control. This is the female relative, obviously a matriarch, who controls the whole family. She makes the rules for the whole family. Now, if Pluto is not in good aspect to Saturn, that means the matriarch and the other authority figures in the family, the relatives, the ancients, are at odds with each other. And you're not sure who to believe, who to follow. But you'll be a victim of I mean, that's the problem. You're placed in the victim role when you follow your programming. And so what I suggest is you release your victim role. On the other side of the victim role is the victimizer role. We have both sides. You let it go and you are free. But you have to let go of the need to be in control, because the matriarch, Pluto, rules control. And when you have to be in control, you're controlled by the control. You're owned by the control. And the reason we control is out of fear of being controlled. Well, what happens if you're controlled? Well, you'll be annihilated. It's the fear of death is what it is. So the way out of that I found is to turn your life over to whatever your concept of God is. Now, you don't belly up and do nothing. You take charge. You take your responsibility. And what you do is you say, look, I'm not going to play the control game. I'm turning it over to God. And when you do that, and you have to do it consciously for a while.
And I'm going to interrupt you, Maxine. Your sound just suddenly totally went away. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me pull this a little closer.
Thank you.
And okay. When you let go of control, you take charge. And that means that you're going to be responsible. You're going to take your responsibility. But the matriarch no longer owns you. And then Pluto becomes the planet of transformation and rebirth. And you become the phoenix rising on its own ashes. You may have noticed that I use the positive interpretation. I tell you what the flip-flop is. I tell you what the catch-22 is. And the catch-22 on Pluto is that she controls you and you don't even know it half the time. Well, you say, well, the matriarch was my grandmother and she died when I was 3 years old. Yeah. Well, they're alive on the other side, wielding their control. But you can take charge of your life, and that's the way out.
So we talked about moon is mother, sun is father,
Yes.
Saturn is reality.
Well, Saturn is the older should and ought to authority figures. The older, like grandparents, they carry the cultural lineage forward.
And then Pluto's matriarch, the messages from our matriarchs. Any other major planets that we need to understand and how they affect our parental programming?
Oh, yes, that's really a good question.
I would have to ask about Venus.
Oh, Venus is love and money. It's the lesser benefic. We've got two good guys in the zodiac. One is Jupiter, the greater benefic. It's God's law. Saturn is man's law. You should do this. Jupiter is joy and expansiveness, and Venus is love and beauty and money, and love and money, and love and money. It is one of the good guys. So if you have Venus, as you have requested, in lovely aspect to Saturn, it means that your love nature is in a harmonious relationship with the older authority figures in your life. You probably love each other. They love you, you love them. And you're happy to listen to stories about the old country and your family history. However, Jupiter, very, very interesting. Jupiter is God's law. Saturn is man's law. And if they are in harmony, hey, you've got it made. But if they're not, you have opposite messages and you don't know which way to go. Now let's throw Mars into the mix.
Mhm.
Mars is passion, Mars is sex, Mars is war. Wherever Mars is in your chart, that's what you fight with and fight for. It's what comes first to you. And I'm very much a follower of Mars because when I say you'll fight with it and fight for it, yes. So if let's say you have Mars in the 10th house, the 10th house is your career, your public image. Mars rules Aries, so it's the planet of action. It's terrific. I love Mars when it is well aspected in the chart. If it's in your 10th house, being a leader, being on top is vitally important to you. And you're always going to have very high ambitions for yourself, and you're always going to move upward. See, I think that's terrific. Now, the problem can be if you have Mars in the 10th house of career and you're a natural business person, and you have Saturn, the should and ought to, in the fourth house, which is directly in opposition to that, which is home and family. And they're saying, you need to be at home making babies. You need to be at home listening to the family and doing what the family wants. So those two can, and so you see that the relationships between the different planets are what we're looking at.
Fascinating information. Maxine Taylor, author of your 8th astrology book, Hidden Messages in Your Birth Chart. Any final thoughts for our audience?
Yes, you are in charge of your life. The stars do not compel you to do anything. They don't make you do anything. They just tell you what's going on. You have the choice as to how you use them and those aspects. And so my wish for you, my blessing for you out there is that the stars shine brightly on you and yours.
Beautiful message. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Our guest today has been the one and only Maxine Taylor, America's first licensed astrologer and author of Hidden Messages in Your Birth Chart. You can find out more about Maxine Taylor and her wonderful work at her website, MaxineTaylor.com. And remember, listen deeply to the messages and decide your own truth to take your power back. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.